Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:03 p.m. and the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees are now convened in a workshop on Monday, July 15, 2024. A quorum of board members is present. However, Ms. Lee will not join us this evening, nor will Mr. Norwood. This meeting has been duly called. Notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The first item on the agenda is public comments. Becca, do we have?
None.
Zero. Okay. Moving on to item 3. There being no public comments, we will move on to the board workshop. Academic progress report. Dylan?
Yes, thank you, board, and thank you. Board member Chris Floor is online with us, and so thank you for participating. And so tonight, board, Gabby Nino, our assistant superintendent for teaching and learning, is here, and she's providing an academic update. She's also joined. We have some of her team members behind Aaron and Manuel. So Tracy Rear is here and Holly Moore. So they may chime in. Gabby may have questions for them throughout the process. Appreciate y'all being here. And with that, Gabby, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, I mean it when I'm saying it's not working back. Let me see if it's on. I mean it when I say I'm excited for this conversation this evening. I asked Melinda to be a critical friend for me and help me stay on time, because I really think that we've been thoughtful in planning some ways for us to engage in conversation. And so my goal during this time is for us to really be able to engage in some good dialogue around our student performance in Belton ISD. And we built today's workshop around some of the questions that you all have asked over time and some interest areas that you've shown. And so I'm thrilled to be able to jump into this conversation. So really it's just for us to engage in conversation. So I ask of you to please don't wait for me to pause always, like jump in and let's have some really good talking time today. So there's 4 big areas that I want us to dig in deep to today. One is STAAR assessment updates. And we've talked about these a couple of times, but I haven't really felt like we've stopped and you've seen some really good solid examples of what our students and staff and team are experiencing. So we're going to look at some actual assessment questions and talk through the updates with the STAAR 2.0 and give you the opportunity to experience some things. I will talk through and engage you in some analysis of our 3 through 8 outcomes. It's going to look very similar to what we did with our EOC data, but it's for grade levels 3 through 8 with some comparison to the state as well. And then I shared with you all last time that I was going to come to you with some recommendations for House Bill 3 goals, and I want to hear your input on that. And the most important thing for me today is that we have some tangible time in our planned responses so that you can have in front of you and we can talk about some steps that we're taking to support our classroom teachers and our teacher leaders. So this is kind of the big picture of what we'll walk through today. And I want to start with something that looks familiar to you all, but spend a little bit more time talking about it. So the purpose of the next few slides, you all have seen the first 3 columns before that are just kind of bulleted changes in our assessment that our students take on STAAR and our teachers facilitate in the process. What we added this time is a side-by-side for you all. And Becca, I would ask if you could zoom in on this one if you're able to. If not, it's in the packet, so we're good. But there's a bulleted list on the side that hasn't changed, but I want to talk a little bit more about the heaviest impact that we're feeling and needing to respond to. So we know that it's 100% online now, which is a shift. But we talked about that automated scoring engine last time and the increase in rigor. So I want to dig in deeper to that today and also look at what some of the new question types are that we can spend time in talking about what the implications are for teachers. You'll see on this slide a variety of grade levels and content areas and what the former STAAR question structure might look like, as well as what the new one might look like. And so we're going to stop on this slide in just a second. Let me just introduce that the questions we'll look at right now are for English 1 and 8th grade science. And so in your packet, you can see it a little bit better, but on similar standards, you'll see the structure of question on the old STAAR test that we took, as well as side by side with the new one. So I just want you to look at that really quickly, and let's just share out some of, just without even digging in deep, what are some of the observable changes that you see?
Well, fill in the blank versus multiple choice. So you at least you're going to get one of the 4 right versus you may not get it right at all. You don't have the choices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that one is an example of what we call a short constructed response. It's a more abbreviated answer, but absolutely there's a change. What do you think that means for the thinking required for students and the teachers?
They'll have to go back and reread this over and over until they get a really good understanding of what they've read.
Critical.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you both just made 2 points that are really important as it relates to instructional implications. The needing to go back, one of the requirements of the rubrics and scoring assessments is that students go back and they support their responses with evidence. And so you're right, they have to go back again and again to look at the information they have and provide evidence in their responses. And Mr. Alcazar, that critical thinking, you will see aligned in our rubric the need for students to sustain thought over time as they're problem solving, go back into the information they have, and then to be able to communicate their ideas. That whole communicating your ideas is a big shift when you had 4 to choose from before. The other things that stand out to you. Take a look at the 8th grade science, the way the information is organized.
I like the visual under the 2.0. It's easier to look at and discern. And then it says select 3 correct answers, and that's the 3 is bolded, so that's helpful.
You know, it's interesting. I looked at this one with a parent in our system. They had a completely different reaction than what you had and said, okay, my child who has a hard time focusing, having to follow these arrows through this would be very, very challenging for them. And we discussed like different learner needs, even when we talked about space, when Mike and I visited with you all about that. So there's on these 2 examples, they're just short examples to show different layers of thinking that are required of students as they are taking the assessments. Let's look at 7th grade math and U.S. history. The print on your copy is pretty small, but what you'll see is kind of the same thing. I had these 4 choices on STAAR 2.0. But I have to layer in multiple processes of thinking in order to respond on STAAR 2.0. So there's a higher degree of process thinking that's happening. Erin, I saw your eyes go up. Tell me about your reaction. Your body language is telling me something.
I don't want to get on the soapbox that I'm sure everybody wants to get on, but it's, you know, if the state of Texas, if we weren't doing not necessarily that great, why the need to change to such complex critical, I mean, not that we weren't teaching our kids critical thinking in the first column, but why the need to change it to be so much more complex? I don't know. I remember when I was teaching in the position that I was able to administer the test since I was working with kids with dyslexia. And so I could read the test, and I just remember thinking, these 10-year-olds, their brains just aren't cognitively developed enough to even understand some of the wording of these questions. And I remember just fuming that day. And so I guess to me it's just, can you explain, I guess, to me why the need for such big drastic changes?
So I think
the
if we
STAAR?
step away from a STAAR test, and we just talk about what we want for our students in preparation for the future, all of us would agree that we want them thinking at higher levels, right? We have articulated that in our vision, our values and beliefs and goals, and our journey of a graduate competencies. We don't disagree at all about the need to increase the level of thinking. So this is a hard conversation to have because we want to think at deeper levels. There was a significant change very quickly, and our standards that are assessed have not changed. So our teachers have invested, especially ours that have been in profession for a while, in knowledge of their standards, and they're having to learn to think about those standards differently in a different process. We don't disagree with that at all. We want kids to generalize. But the reason I wanted us to look through this lens today is because I think it helps us understand the STAAR data from a different perspective, having an experience looking at it, that when we see changes in our data, in particular statewide, this helps us understand of it. Our teachers are on a learning curve. There's demands for our curriculum writing that happens, and we've got to focus on mastery of learning and the learning experience while also simultaneously learning the way students will be assessed in order to demonstrate that mastery. And there's a fine balance there. We do not want to teach to a test. We want to teach students and allow them to think critically, but we also have to become equipped with what the assessment literacy is in order to make sure that kids experience success with that. And so there's a big degree of change that we are facing, and so just wanted to really show that. Now, let's,
Abby,
yes,
real
sir.
quick, on the math question, are they allowed, do they have any kind of access to pencil and paper related to this, or they do it all on the desk?
Yes, and thank you so much for jumping in. Yes, they do. They have access. They've got online accommodation and tools that they can use, but any child has access to paper and pencil as well that they can work on throughout the testing environment. And Chris, that's really important that you ask that because you've seen a little bit, but we've really incorporated a lot of collaborative strategies in our classrooms that allow students to get up and record their thinking in order to explain their thinking and communicate their ideas. And so we need them to be able to do that as they're problem solving on their assessments as well. It's a great question.
Gabby, can we make, as a district, can we make changes fast enough to keep up with their changes? You understand my question?
I do. I understand your question. And it's hitting me internally. I'm not an excuse maker. And so that's a hard one for me to answer. The rate of change, in my opinion, this is my opinion, was too fast. And the degree of change, I'm going to show you a couple of other things that demonstrate how much change is happening that everyone is needing to make sense of. Our teachers, our curriculum team, assessment and accountability. The magnitude of change is so significant that we are working really, really hard on it.
I mean, that's the problem, though,
Yeah.
huh?
It's contributing. It's absolutely contributing.
Right, it's a significant flaw in the way that the changes are made. I mean, I understand that we want kids to do better, right?
Absolutely.
To increase the level of thinking, increase the level of critical thinking, but everything comes with a process.
Absolutely.
So it is. I mean, when I'm listening to you and then I hear all these things, Dr. Gold and I had discussions. That's what I'm seeing. I mean, am I off in left field?
Well, I mean, you've got, Gabby said, so the standards didn't change. However, the curriculum resources and the curriculum writing had to adjust. The instructional delivery and design then has to adjust. Teachers' assessment practices have to adjust.
Right, but can we adjust quick enough and fast enough to be able to do what's being asked of us by the state?
So here's what I want to face internal for a little bit and say there's some factors that are contributing internally that I have to own in order to feel good about this conversation. our curriculum documents are supporting resources for teachers. Everybody had worked really hard on them. That is not to say that anybody was not working really hard. We want a guaranteed viable curriculum that minimizes variability in classrooms. And that means our standards have to be really clear. We have instructional experiences connected to standards, aligned assessments available that will allow us to come together as a collaborative that's focused on student learning and outcomes. And we had significant work to do in that area. And so while this big change is happening statewide in the degree of demand on students and teachers, we also are working really hard to make sure that the tools that teachers have in their hands, the tools that leaders have in their hands to do what needs to happen, there's big work there for us internally as well. And so your question is super loaded for me personally, because we've got to commit to our own improvement efforts as well. The degree of change is massive, and it's hurting. And it's hurting statewide, and we're going to look at that. And I think that'll help answer the question grounded in data about what is manageable.
Oh, and I think to your point, Manuel, no, those kind of changes don't happen overnight. And so it takes time. You know, I feel like our teachers have worked really hard to know their standards. And so, but when you change assessments, you change assessment practices, it has implications on instructional practices and design. That takes time. That takes time to redesign. That takes time to start getting comfortable with, changing assessment practices. You know, we don't want to be a district where people are just filling out packets and practicing a STAAR-like assessment, but they have to have some experiences and assessments that where they're not seeing those things for the very first time. So those assessments have to be designed, tested, implemented with students. So I do feel like that can't happen overnight, and that takes time. And then that also assumes that the resources that you've adopted align to those standards. Even though standards haven't changed, can we make the assumption that the resources are still sufficient resources to align to a different instructional delivery? And I think the answer is you can't assume that. So there's got to be a lot of work, and Tracy's head's been nodding back and forth. There's a lot of work, and that's not just from the teaching and learning team, but the staff that's coming together and helping write curriculum are our teachers, as it should be. Our teachers are helping design assessments. Our teachers are helping design what those curriculum documents look like.
I always feel like there's a sense of blindsidedness that comes from the state with what they're wanting us to do. And then, I mean, as I listen to you, I'm thinking about a legislative priority, right, for next legislative session. And one of those is the implementation that they put on us. Sometimes we just don't have enough time to make the change.
I think there might be an underestimation of the magnitude of change and the rate of change.
Yeah.
But then I think we also have to think about it is an indicator.
Right.
It is not the only indicator of student learning. And, there's not a test that can compete with a teacher in a classroom who's listening to someone reading, who's listening to their rate, who's been a part of helping them develop the skills of literacy, and so it's a measure. It just can't be our only measure because of the things we've talked about.
Now, what we are getting, because we're in year 2, is we're starting to see question types to a greater degree, which is going to help inform the changes we make. This one I really want to spend time on, and this has been a curiosity for you all. I'm going to talk a little bit about automated scoring. So we talked at our last board meeting about the reality that we are putting writing samples for students through automated AI. Sorry, I was struggling with a word for a second. And so I'm going to show you 2 different writing samples, and I want you to really think about what you see in the students' writing, and we'll talk about the scoring of that.
Okay, just for clarification, Gabby, you said we are. You're saying, not
We as a state.
we as a Belton ISD, you're saying that the state is scoring these written assessments by putting the student writing samples through artificial intelligence to actually do the scoring?
Yes.
Instead of a human doing the scoring?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so y'all asked some questions about that last time, and so I
Yeah.
want you to see the
That's valid.
outcomes here. So up top, you don't even have to read it, this is just for a visual sample for you. These are 4th grade students on an extended response. They have a selection to read, and then to the left is a prompt that they get that just encourages them to read the story. I don't know why it's blurry up there. And explain how the events of the story cause the character to change his opinions. And then write a well-organized informational composition that uses specific evidence from the text. I never want to read to you all, but for some reason it's looking, is that blurry to you all?
It's
Okay.
pretty small.
It, so I'm going to read you just an excerpt from it, just so you can hear the writer,
That's what ours looks like.
because it's animated. So that 0 is about to pop up. Have you ever thought you were better than someone in a sport before? In the story from Sidekick, written by Zach Riley, a character, Cody, thinks he is a better soccer player than his friend Matt. The child goes on to write several more paragraphs. One reason Cody thinks this is because he is a better soccer player than Matt is because he's always on the other side of the field. Another paragraph going down one. Another reason he thinks he is a better soccer player is because he doesn't have more time on the field. So we've got 4 paragraphs from a student. The final paragraph goes on to encourage the reader that just because you are better than someone else doesn't mean you actually are, and everyone will have their chance to shine. So with that blurry view, I want you to ask yourself, just on a 0 to 10, 4th grade writer, what might you give that writer? With nothing else in front of you.
And they look at even grammar, spelling, punctuation, they look at all of that too?
The AI
AI.
does.
Okay.
It goes through the
So
engine.
that score, their score
Mhm.
actually includes not just the content, but the actual.
Right. There is a rubric. There's 5 areas of the rubric, and it really emphasizes response to the prompt, evidence from the text, and organization. And I said organization because there's several areas, but that's the theme of them.
I'll give it a 6.
You give it a 6.
It's a 7, 8.
7. Why would you do that, Ms. McDonald? Why would you give it a 6?
Well, I mean, it's pretty comprehensive. I mean, did they follow exactly what they were told to do? I'm not really sure, because it is kind of tiny, so my gut says it's 6.
6.
I'm solid.
Marker, you said a 7?
7 or 8, yeah.
7 or 8? What's your why?
I thought it was, the opening sentence sounds like something you would write at a much later grade. Sounded a little bit above 4th grade. I don't know, I haven't been in 4th grade in a while. But the fact that they wrote multiple paragraphs and have their data stated over and over seems like they learned their stuff.
This student scored a 0.
What? Really?
AI said that?
AI said that.
We can't use
What do you
that.
think
Now,
about that?
So,
Is this AI a 9-year-old?
Alicia.
Come on, they're not.
so what we can
harsh.
see is that their AI is, what we know and we're learning about AI is straightforward responses. We see correlation, right? So in this writer's words, there wasn't a direct, exact connection back to the prompt. Even though they used evidence, there wasn't like precision in their language. And they got a 0 as a result of that. It wasn't off on the rubric, but what we've done for years and years and years as teachers, as I would stand behind, is we are teaching authorship. We are naming all the things that you just named, and they are a part of our standards. And we affirm students for their voice, and we compliment what they're doing while we give teaching points as well. There's some precision in the AI that takes that away, in my opinion. Now let's look, exact same prompt, different student, and here you can see a little bit better. Cody, this is their response. Cody was surprised because in the text it says the defendants would swarm him. If Mudd was lucky, he might avoid being swarmed, but somehow he danced around all of them, and Cody was surprised when the Mudd scored a goal. And in the end, Cody felt surprised about Mudd. This shows Cody was surprised at Mudd. Let's do the same thing. What would their score be for you?
4.
4?
It had run on sentences, there wasn't enough concentration, so I'm
Run
giving
on
it a 0.
sentences, repetitive.
Yeah, I'm at a 0.
You're at a 0?
I am.
It wasn't good. I don't know what the number is, but
I'd give it a 0.
So
3 or 4.
yeah.
this student scored a 6.
What?
Is this a real life?
This is, yes, and actually, this happened, we pulled our district samples, but I happen to have 2 4th graders of my own children, and these happen to be their writing samples. And so I'm looking at it going, whoa, like not only as an educator, but you know, as a parent, being able to look at 2 side by side. Yeah, it's real life. So there's some implications in this where I'm not taking Leilani's side, but I could see an author in her writing and some direction. I see that in his as well, but she is a writer. She loves getting out that writer notebook. She loves sharing her stories with other people, and there's some clarification I can give her to strengthen it, but it's not a 0. Adrian has some teaching points, right? I can look at standards there, but it's like just his writing was not quite as strong. So want to just talk about that together, about what does that mean for us instructionally then, as we're thinking about serving our students and preparing our teachers to assess students as measured by STAAR.
Do we have any sort of AI software that they can use throughout the school year to do this and use
Practice.
and then have each other as a class collaborate?
So right now, we're not using a specific one, but we do have a team that Shad and Frank have been working with, who have been really working on exploring AI tools and AI benefit. And there are some great things that we want to steal with AI as well, but we haven't landed on a specific one, but have talked about strategies to use that. But it's a great question, and there's some challenge in front of us for that. But I think,
Go ahead.
Is anyone grading the AI? I mean, did they get any review process?
so that's what's happening across the state right now with this is, I just shared my children's for grins because they're in the same, but we're looking at writing samples to see what we're learning from it and where points are earned and where they're not. Because
it'll be consistent.
it may not be. And what we don't want to do is completely turn our back on something that has potential to be a strong tool for us as well. We want to learn from it and also not let this become our classrooms. I don't want a teacher not giving quality teaching points that acknowledge the strengths that this little girl has as an author and that passion, right? So we're gonna have to make sense of this, but to your questions about change and could we move fast enough, we couldn't have known this. There wasn't a way for us to know this in advance, that degree of impact, and so we are having to study alongside many others. And beyond just these 2 samples, I am not reading this slide to you all, I promise you, but what I do want to orient you to is the way this is structured, because this is a tool that we're using to analyze. This is every grade level, and on the left is the type of text that students had to engage with, the type they read in 23, and the way they had to respond to it with a different genre of text. Then next to it is the type or genre of text that they engaged in 2024. So it's just a side by side, and what this will show you is that in every grade level but 5th, there was a change in genre. And so as we are, back to your question, as we are learning, you want to be able to measure growth over time. And even though we have 2 years now, it's being tested differently. And so it's challenging for us to compare apples to apples. The magnitude of learning that we're needing to do is pretty large. And it makes it challenging for comparative. And that doesn't mean we're not doing it, but that is a large degree of change. On the far right is just to show you, in addition, is that in the 2023 school year, we only had short constructed responses in grade levels 8 and English 1, and then this year those were added in all grade levels too. So this again, the purpose of this slide is to show again in one content area the magnitude of change that we are experiencing as a system.
Where does it stop? Where does it end? You know, we have third graders doing senior stuff. I mean, really, where does it end? There's got to be so much that someone can do, right?
Well, it just continues to evolve. If we think about the assessment history over time, and I won't get all the acronyms right, and I definitely will date myself, but every so many years, you start to see, particularly as it tends to follow that as performance starts to go up. You see that over time when you've got an assessment that you've been using for a while. For the things we've been talking about, people start to understand the assessments better. They start to understand, like we'll be studying our students' responses and how they were scored, and we'll learn from that. And that will make, therefore, our instructional decisions more aligned, and that takes time. And as that happens, you'll start to see scores go up across the state. And then as you start to see scores go up, it's typically over time when the assessment then changes again. And in theory, it's just to ensure that we're continuing to raise the bar, raise the bar, raise the bar.
Hey Gabby, before you move on, can we go back to the genres?
Yes.
Under the 8th and English 1, for 24, it says informational composition in response to a literary excerpt on 2 of those, and then on English 2, it goes from informational composition in response to a literary excerpt to, and then on 24 it goes back to an informational article. What's the differences there?
So those are types of a genre that I read might be an informational composition. That's the type of text that I read. And then, or actually I just flipped it for you. I'm so sorry, just because I'm hidden on the screen. An informational article a student wrote, then they needed to respond through an informational essay. So it's the type of genre that they read and then they wrote about.
Okay.
Then in this school year, they got a literary excerpt, so it was just a piece of text that they got, and then had to respond with an informational composition.
Gotcha. Okay.
So students, you think about that, the cognitive demand, the critical thinking required, I need to understand what this type of text is I'm reading, and every genre is constructed in different ways and has different purpose. And then I have to think about what is the demand, what does it mean to write an informational response, an informational essay, and follow those criteria in my writing. No
These
problem.
two, there would be options to write a personal narrative. I don't see that anywhere in the composition. Why did they get a move away from writing narratives or personal narratives? Or
Yeah, so you'll see, I hear you over there. I hear you over there. Are you wanting to respond, Tracy? Go for it. Jump in. Jump in. Yeah, there are, like you'll see response to story, an argumentative essay gives a little bit more opinion within it. But yes, it was less, there was more broad. Yeah. So there's just a big demand there.
yeah.
So what I want you to have a chance to look at really quick is, we're not studying the data up here. I gave you a big sheet in front of you, and it's currently folded. And I want to make sure that you guys have the green one is what you're looking at. The top section is green and says state over time, STAAR results. So don't unfold your paper yet. On the far left, you'll see every grade level 3rd through 8th. And then there's 3 different tables here for you. The top one is reading, the middle one is math, and at the bottom includes 5th science and social studies because they're tested in fewer areas. As you read across the table that we gave you, you'll see the different performance levels and performance over time. Really, the emphasis I want you to look at is that last column of change, and just take, with your elbow partner next to you, want you to look and what are some of the things that are standing out to you as trends in the state data. Just mark it up and take notes all over it.
Math went down everywhere.
The change is over 3 years.
The change on the far right is just the change from 23 to 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's 23 to 24.
Yeah.
4th grade reading, math a little bit, 6th grade reading, put down math, down science, social studies.
Not a ton of.
Well, I guess social studies is 8th. It's really down in science and math. You all see some.
So looking at, these are for
Approaches and meets and historic masters.
I'm looking at, I'm trying to compare.
Oh, they
Wow.
cross grade.
Yeah, and do we see anything?
What does that mean?
This is
Getting better.
interesting.
Well,
Math
these are a good
get
point
better.
because look here,
It
now
does-
you've
it
got
does go
grade
to-
2,
Wow.
There's
The
grade
these are
4,
on
4, 5, 8, whereas that's also the grade level that did the best in reading. So this class.
Now, these over here, 4th grade,
But for social studies,
Fourth
you've got
grade,
the
which
one.
means
is
it's a
better.
master's
It's
degree
the grade, it looks like.
compared to
Oh, these
I
change.
don't know what that
5th grade.
means. It was because of the test or because of the students?
So the 5th
It's
graders
difficult
were
to make
in
an apples,
1st grade.
apples comparison.
See,
Yes.
Like, here's an
You're
example.
following.
when this happens.
Yeah, cause like this
So
4th
did
grade
COVID
reading
to
at
make
the
any difference in the
masters,
numbers?
23, 21%. His masters, so he jumped up to 28%. But if you compare apples to oranges, it looks like there wasn't much change.
Good point.
So I'm just curious what that.
So then it was
grade
redesigned
side. Let's see, here you've got a decrease in approaches.
between
A slight
this year and
increase in
this year, it
meats,
was
And
redesigned.
then you
So
jump
there
up
was a
to
big change.
28%
right?
masters.
So after the change,
That, down a little bit.
So I don't want to rush you all at all,
great.
but my
It's
team
great.
is reminding me that the point is for us to look at big standouts. And so I'm going to bring us back together really quick just to say, what are some things that are standing out to you as you look at the state data?
here,
Math went down quite a bit.
Yeah, so I have that, like, wanting to make sure we notice that there's not a single grade level at the state level who shows growth in math. There are 2 areas that were no change, but we see a decrease in student performance at all proficiency levels in math across the state.
And science and social studies has, I mean, there's not a whole lot of improvement for science and social studies. Got a 1% positive for social studies, grade.
So the standards didn't change.
The standards that are assessed did not change. Now, I came to you all for approval of instructional resources because our science standards have changed. Those are being rolled out in the coming school year. The standards assessed have not changed.
So there was not only the STAAR redesign, but even how they graded it changed. Pretty
Significantly. Ms. McDonald, absolutely, that's one of the areas wanted to highlight, science and social studies across the state as well. did not see growth in those areas, or there was no change. Did you see any areas of growth?
English, grade 4.
Yeah, fourth grade ELA.
Yeah, English 4th and 6th.
Scares me.
I forgot he was there.
Yeah, I love it.
He's
Sorry,
there.
Chris.
Yes.
And also fourth grade math, that's also the same grade level that decreased the least in math.
So I'm glad you saw that those are the only areas of gain. One of the things that's important for us to keep in mind is that we look for statistical significance. And typically you look for 3 and beyond to say, okay, something different happened here that we need to examine deeper. So now we wanted to take a look at that so you could see some statewide trends. Just right before we looked at ours. So if you'll open up, and now you can see us side by side. Want to do the same thing, just give you a couple minutes to look at our performance data. And have you share some big standouts, and then I'll absolutely highlight what we're looking at.
I mean, it's still bad, but it's not that bad. Wow. The purchase is 70, -70%.
So you said 3 or more points would be statistical.
That's what we typically look at, yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
We did better in fourth grade math.
Mhm.
So let's take about another minute just to see those big standouts, and then I'll summarize
Mhm.
what we're seeing.
Wow.
Mhm.
That was what is that? It's so we seventh graders did what grade?
All right, we all share out.
Well,
Third
7th grade math, that really stuck out compared to the state. Yeah, -17%, and the approaches, that's significant.
Absolutely.
Those were the third grade COVID kids, right?
Our students who are in 7th grade now, yes.
That was a huge.
What else stands out to you? Chris, is there anything that's standing out to you? I don't want to forget about you.
Yeah, I mean, when I just kind of squinted at the teams up my side, I think most of the slow spots are similar, right? So we kind of follow the scheme. If you look at math, right, at third and fourth grade, we actually did better than the state. There's a couple real stinkers, right? So if you look at the ones that are double digits, right, and the negative, right, those are maybe exceptions sort of spot. But again, if you squint at it, right, it kind of matches up with a couple of exceptions.
We beat the state in third grade.
So,
Go ahead. One thing, Gabby, definitely 7th grade math stands out, and I think you probably will hit this in a little bit, but part of that is there are some decisions in 7th grade as to which tests students take. And so part of what you're seeing at 7th grade is a very intentional testing decision not to test a significant number of our 7th graders utilizing an on-grade level test. So part of that, and Gabby will explain that in a little bit, and those are testing decisions that we can make at the local level, but that's part of what you're seeing, because there's a lot of 7th graders that don't even take the 7th grade STAAR. So we'll explain that one in just a sec. But the other thing I want to notice, like I'm looking at our reading scores, and while we've been looking a lot at spring of 23 to spring of 24, those are two different groups of students. And one of the things that's standing out to me is when you look at spring of 23 and you follow that cohort to spring of 24 in reading, for example, you see some pretty significant jumps in master's level performance. So like when you look at 4th grade, in 23, 19% of those students were hitting the master's level. We'll jump over to, in theory, that cohort is roughly the same in 24. We're jumping up to 26% mastery. So when you look at it, now there's some where the trend is not that great. But I'm looking at 6th grade to 7th grade in reading mastery. We go from 18% hitting mastery in 7th grade, 28%. So I think it's, and then you see 7th grade mastery 24%, and then in spring of 24 it jumps up to 31%. So I think being able to look at it not just apples to oranges, but also look at cohorts and growth or not growth over time. I think I'm seeing some growth trends as well.
So in that 7th grade math, right, I think we looked at this all a little bit, right, the drop in 4th grade, so approaches from 62 to 34, like pre and post grade, right, 7th grade math. That is the single largest drop across all these areas.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's also the group that continues to struggle right now and kind of play it forward. Yeah, I mean, that's a group that needs some special attention for sure.
And you're right, Chris, and I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do to give that special attention. So we wanted to look at this side by side so that you can see, yes, that there are some parallels in our performance, and so that you all are able to see what's happening across the state. But we do have highlights within and areas that are outliers for us that we're going to really focus on. And you talked about some of them, but we do see increases at 4th grade reading approaches, 4th grade reading meets, 6th grade reading meets and masters, and some big gains there. And we also have some highlights in particular at 3rd grade compared to performance at the state level, and then meets performance in math at 3rd, 4th, and 6th grade. Overall, some areas that we are really working to prioritize is focus on growth, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to do that. There's transition challenges at transition grade levels, and so there's some implications for how we vertically support students and support staff. And then the writing across content areas. Showed you some writing examples across content areas as well. We are really strategizing to emphasize that and put tools in place for teachers. In reading, it's those constructed responses in the 5th to 6th transition. And in math, it's 5th grade, transition years, and 7th grade in particular. Since that emerged, I want to talk to you about some work that we've done. We worked with a consultant and really emphasized math instruction. You all have supported some investment in some resources. We're going to invest in what's called Walk with Purpose, professional learning and curriculum resources specific to middle school math. And we will have an intensive professional learning with our 7th grade teachers across the system, and Walk with Purpose. What Walk with Purpose curriculum does, it highly emphasizes daily assessment at the formative level through conferencing with students, as well as them demonstrating tangibly their knowledge on assessments, and it also has a frequent spiral back of concepts in this curriculum resource. We feel it's much stronger than what we have had in place before, and we're seeing some positive impact, in particular at South Belton Middle School with this curriculum. And so we'll be supporting all of our teachers with that training and learning. I want to scoot through here real quick to additional resources that you have in front of you that I think is very important for you to see. This was really the purpose, and I gave you extras of how we approach today. You guys have seen in our last workshop the BISD instructional framework. And so I'm going to ask that you flip through that and our critical thinking rubric to the page that looks like this, our intentional planning tool, and then a curriculum document. As we move into the 24-25 school year, we are heavily focusing on intentional planning for students through the lens of critical thinking and the prioritized standards that we've talked to you about. All of our standards don't carry the same weight. And we are also focusing on assessment for learning. Those areas of focus will be embedded. We are looking through our instructional resources through that lens, the professional learning that we provide for teachers in that lens, and how we're supporting collaborative teams to be focused on student outcomes. Every single one of our campuses, along with our teaching and learning team, is going through Learning Together with Solution Tree. The learning includes our principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches, and teachers to build and emphasize a collaborative culture that's focused on student outcomes through the lens of these things. One of the things the reason I wanted you to turn here is that we have been working very hard across our system in articulating agreed upon processes and ensuring that we have the tools in place to support those. You have a visual here of what we would call the intentional planning
So right
process.
here, you want us on this page?
Yes, this one. The intentional planning process that we are using in Belton ISD across our campuses starts with what we want students to know. And you can see below that intentional questions that are asked for our PLC teams. We're asking ourselves second, how will we know if students learned it? What is the learning plan for them? And how will we respond if they do or do not have the knowledge? We've articulated the process we want teams to go through and are providing the learning support in order to make sure that we are able to answer those questions, as well as curriculum documents to support that work and design. I want you to turn.
Before we do, real quickly,
Yes.
so we've been in front of you many times this past year, and we talk about PLC, PLC, PLC. So when we talk about that, what do we want students to know? How we know if they've learned it? What's the plan? And what's our response if they do or don't? Those are the questions that when we talk about PLCs, whether that's a PLC time in a day or a collaborative team of teachers or administrators coming together, those are the foundational questions that really form the backbone of what we call PLC. And that is that we're all here and focused on up front, what do they need to know and be able to do? And how does the assessments, how do they inform us when we're sitting down to the table? How do we design instruction around that? How will we know if they learned it? That's when Gabby's talking about formative assessments. How do we know? What's that look like on an ongoing basis? What's the plan for getting them there, and what happens if they do get it, so that we continue for those that we're not wanting to put a ceiling on students who are getting it the first time and want to go beyond, but also how are we intervening in the event that they don't? That's what we mean quite a bit when we talk about PLCs. Those questions become the foundation of what we're talking about.
So they go through this process for every unit of study and for every content. It's hard work.
It is very hard work, and we're not going to have much time in it, but I'm very, very proud of our curriculum team and our curriculum writers. The tool that's on the next page for you is a sample of a unit document to support that, because Ms. Bachelor point is very well taken. It is a lot of work.
3 minutes.
And so what we've done in the true rewrite of our curriculum, not just a reorganization, but a rewrite of our curriculum, is to make sure that it is organized, aligned to those questions. So when a teacher starts to plan a unit of study, that what they open is organized, aligned to those questions in the order, and we put tools in place for each phase of that planning process. And so you can see that at a glance if you just flip through one unit document for 4th grade math, where we make recommended how much time you spend on tasks. We have a high-level overview of what will happen in the unit. What are the narrowed essential questions that your students should be able to answer at the conclusion of this unit study? And then those prioritized standards that we've been talking about all year are the very first thing that teachers see. And then we'll also have sample assessments paired with those on how we'll measure whether students learned or did not.
So this is what it would actually look like. If I'm a 4th grade math teacher, this is an example of what I would see when I go into our curriculum.
As you progress forward in each content area, there are recommended research-based practices for how a block of time is spent with students. And so our curriculum documents are organized based on that recommended amount of time that students should spend in each core component of a math block or a literacy block or a science block. That's how our documents are organized now, which will allow a highly experienced teacher to come to the table with a brand new novice teacher and have some organized thinking, so that that intentional conversation is really grounded in students and student learning versus curation of resources or digging through and trying to make sense of things. And so in your spare time, you can flip through, and I feel confident that any one of you all would have the tools that you needed in place. If you walked in to teach in our classrooms today, if you came into sub in a very different way than we have had in the past, and it's evolution. It's not a criticism of the past, it's evolution of the future, supporting our teachers and teams in different ways.
Are these practices mentioned like during culture day, or at what point do you start, socializing this out to your new teachers?
Our entire Ignite is built around this. So we'll have days at the very beginning of the school year that every single teacher in our system will walk through the new instructional documents, and we'll have planning time collaboratively across the system.
So Gabby, I know we're out of time. The sample curriculum unit that you shared is new as a result of the work that our teachers did and our teaching and learning team facilitated this summer in response to some of the data we just looked at.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is new, but this is gonna be brand new for this coming year.
Yes. So they started
It's
some,
revised.
yes, they started some work last summer, shared that with you, but they did an overhaul
Right.
this summer. Our teachers and our curriculum coordinators, they did an overhaul in alignment with our instructional framework, with our intentional planning documents, to make sure that every single teacher has resources connected to standards and recommendations for how they structure instruction in their
Thank all
classrooms.
those folks.
They've done incredible work. And that was led by Tracy with our curriculum writing. And she and Holly have partnered extremely closely to make sure that the right data is in front of teachers as they are designing and
we had
putting our
great
critical
learning
thinking.
from, I don't know if you mentioned, but CMSI is an organization that does curriculum audits across the country. So we actually were able to bring them in to do learning with our team and with teachers that came in with us that were gonna be part of our curriculum writing. We did that earlier in the year, which was like, I think, very foundational to the work that.
Are you excited to implement this?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I know we're out of time and we need to go to the board meeting, but also we recognize there is no perfect curriculum document. And so as teachers start implementing and utilizing these resources this year, then there's a feedback loop that has to be in place, because again, these will get better and better over time. The more assessment history we have and data we have, it will inform improvements over time. And so while there's been amazing work, there's also a recognition that this will only continue to get better the more it's used. And so, again, thank you to Gabby for her leadership, and Tracy and Holly, and our incredible teachers. People think we all go home over the summer. We have incredible staff and teachers who've worked really hard this summer to improve these documents. So we're really looking forward to getting feedback on them and hearing how they're being received once teachers use them.
This is where it all starts, isn't it?
Yes. So,
Man, good job.
thank you, Gabby.
To all you ladies.
They
Yeah.
have worked extremely hard.
It's impressive.
Okay,
Yeah, with BISD's own flavor put to it, right?
yeah, absolutely.
All
Thank
right.
you
Is that it
all.
today?
I think we're,
Okay,
We
well,
done
that,
for the evening?
well, Daniel's gonna conclude our meeting first.
all right, so that concludes our board workshop this evening. There being no further business, we are adjourned at 6:03.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.